I started with Agile development very early. People have heard me talk, have heard me say this before, but I started with a process called extreme programming in 2000. I worked with a company that was starting with XP. And while I was there in 2000, the term Agile was coined. I learned I was doing an Agile process. My first job title at the company I was working for in San Francisco at the time was product manager. So I came into Agile from a product perspective. Now, like a lot of people listening, if you've been doing this a while, you've served in lots of other roles, and I've served in about every other role in software development also. I've been focusing on product thinking for the last 20 plus years. And I lately, a lot of my job is teaching product management and coaching organizations. My most common clients are organizations that have adopted Agile development and been using Agile development for a while and are realizing it does not matter. It doesn't help anything, or they're going through a digital transformation and they've adopting Agile development has been part of that, and they've realized that's not their problem. Their problem isn't getting stuff built or getting stuff built faster. They still have lots of problems, and so I get pulled in usually in a post-Agile, when organizations are in a post-Agile funk, and what they're focusing on is adopting product thinking and what that is and what that means. Now, the problem with product thinking, one of my biggest, I'm not so prepared, so I'm going to wander a little bit. Sorry about that. One of my biggest organizations that I've worked with for a long time that was a pretty wild success, and by wild success, meaning over the past 10 years, they've been very successful, is the brick and mortar retailer Target. If you were to look at Target's dojo online, you'll see that product thinking, Agile thinking, and lean thinking are part of the kind of the things that drive them. And I was working with them in very early days, and they've really changed a lot about the way they work and think to be very product-centric. A lot of people from Target spun out of Target to work for other organizations. I was talking with a friend yesterday who's responsible for this transformation stuff in Best Buy. Best Buy and Target are both based in Minneapolis, so that makes sense. And other people spend into US Bank and into Starbucks and things like that. And my friend in Best Buy was just complaining yesterday that this sucks. My sponsorship is gone, and it's imploding, and I'm ready to leave. And I work with organization after organization that can adopt Agile development, but struggles to adopt product thinking. That seems to be the harder thing. And that's because there's a lot of things that make it, there are a lot of tensions that people don't directly deal with. I'm trying to write another book. I need to write a second edition of story mapping, but this is the thing that bugs me the most right now. Every time I teach a class, people say this is fantastic, but the people that really need to understand this are my leaders. Now, when I work with an organization, I will insist on talking to leadership before I talk to the people in the organization, because it's leadership that sabotages things fastest. And it's not understanding some basic tensions behind the way businesses actually work that causes trouble with product thinking. Let me see if I can explain those quickly. And my problem is I can't explain them super quickly, super concisely, and it's really screwing up my ability to get a book written on this stuff. So I'd love I want this to turn into a discussion as soon as possible. Look, if you can see my hands here, you can see what I've written. This is the way I usually present. Look, I want to talk a little bit about this stuff, and then I can talk about anything else. There's a lot of other things bugging me right now. If anybody's using OKRs, those suck, and I have some answers about why those suck and why it makes it so hard. Metrics are a pain, and that's a area where I've got some sharp answers on that. Organizing product teams around products or organizing teams seems to be a big stumbling block in most organizations I work with right off the bat. And then when we start talking about product thinking, organizations and traditional project funding is a big thing, and I've got some clues on that stuff, so we can talk about any of these things. Let me hit this thing first, this business value and customer value thing. Well, some basic tensions I want people to understand is I've been working with Agile development for a long time, and we talk an awful lot about business value, but business value and customer value are not the same thing. And people get these things mixed up, that we can't actually solve business problems directly. And I'll see if I can explain why that's true. And when we focus on business value alone, that causes problems, and we focus on customer value alone, that causes problems. When we don't manage the tension between those two things, that's where things go bad. Now, I've drawn this basic model over and over, and I keep trying to draw it differently so people can really understand the tension thing. You are here because you likely build software or some type of software product. Somebody gives you an idea, and we want to turn that into software. You worry about the time it takes to do that. You worry about the cost of building that stuff. And well, the idea, that's the stuff we call scope. And we spend lots of time worrying about time, cost, and scope. And in there is the quality thing. If you're using an Agile process, this is where an Agile process lives. If you're using a process like Scrum, for instance, Scrum is a time, cost, scope, quality machine. We start every sprint by fixing the cost. Fixed cost for software development means fixing the team and the team size. We start every sprint by fixing the time, usually 2 weeks for a 2-week sprint. And then we force the team to fix scope on itself in a sprint planning session. And at the end of sprint planning, we check the team or look at the team's velocity to see if it delivered what it said it would, and we look at the quality of what we delivered. That's what matters in Agile development. This is where we focus. The reason we built any of that stuff, we hear over and over, is we're looking for business value. And if you look at your organization, the basic name for business value are things like return on investment. That's where value comes from. This is where we can increase revenue, we can lower costs. Also, I'll talk about business value comes in the form of revenue or reputation. Reputation are things like net promoter score, or we increase customer satisfaction. And that's it. The basic idea here is we build software and we get business value. Makes sense so far? Now, this has been a stupid idea from the very beginning. The first people to point out how stupid this idea were the people in South Park, and I need to play a short video to explain this. Somebody already laughed. You already know what this is about, but let's do it for the people who have. There's a lot of young people here. This video is 20 years old. There's in early seasons of South Park, there were a recurring character called the Underpants Gnomes that sneak into your room at night and steal your underwear. I've stitched 2 short clips together, one that introduces them and one that explains their business strategy here. Yeah, let's see if I can quickly recap. Let's do this. Look, phase 1 in the Underpants Gnome scene for them was to collect underpants. For you, it's to build software. Phase 3 in the Underpants Gnome is, well, profit. For you is return on investment, increasing revenue or lowering costs. That's what leads to that. Increasing customer satisfaction, other things like other things your business needs to sustain itself, or things like growth of your business, things like that. That's phase 1. That's phase 3. That's it. Now, the creators of South Park understood that this is a flawed model, and everyone else does, but in a lot of organizations, they don't seem to get it. They don't seem to understand what happens in between phase 1 and phase 3. They think there's a direct connection there, but don't understand what that connection is. So let's cancel that. The direct connection between building software and business value isn't up to you. It's up to your customers and users. And it isn't, well, it's what they do and what they say and how they feel. If you create a piece of software, what you hope is that people will see it and try it. We hope that they use it, and we hope that they say good things about it. Because hopefully, if we're selling the product to them, that's going to increase revenue. If we're building it for our own internal use, the doing makes them more efficient and more effective and lowers costs. And the saying good things, that's what helps the customer satisfaction. So look, what I try and point out is your organization is going to worry a lot about this stuff in blue. They're going to tightly manage how much time it takes you to build things. They're going to watch and see if you built things on time. And then they're going to check their bank accounts and they're going to check their net promoter score and see if their business is doing okay. And most of the time, what they forget to check is this connective tissue, the stuff in between. And what I will refer to, this stuff as is business value. And well, this stuff in the middle is customer and user value. And it's customer and user value that is enabling. That's the stuff that we need to pay attention to. Now, most organizations forget this and forget to measure it. They forget to measure it. They forget to pay attention to it. They forget to recognize that these things are leading indicators for this stuff. You can release software to one person and they can try it and love it and use it, but there's no return on investment for one person using it. But if we release it and we can measure with a few people if it's working, and then we can scale it to lots of people. And most organizations try to go directly to scale, or scale it before you nail it, or which is the opposite of the correct expression, which is nail it before you scale it. Now, if I work backwards from this model, I've drawn this too many times. Well, we usually start with your business again. And if you look at your business inside, your business is filled with people here that are, we call those people business stakeholders, or the business sometimes. Ideally, they've got some vision and some strategy for where they're going. They're responsible for making sure your business can sustain itself. And your business sustains itself not with happy people, but with cash, with money. And if your business also, the stakeholders are responsible for making the organization or helping the organization grow. If your organization is a capitalist organization, no organization wants to stay the same size indefinitely. Can you still hear me? Did this just go? Yeah. Well, that's why I think maybe. All right. Yeah, you guys can hear me in here, and hopefully the people online can, but yeah, this thing. Yeah. All right. Well, we're okay? Good. Look, what ends up happening is these people inside the business, they come up with ideas. And we often talk to those people and look for them to come up with ideas. They'll come up with ideas and then they'll check to see if there's profit. But the problem is these people, they may have business problems. And those business problems are the fact the organization isn't achieving its vision, or its strategy isn't working, or it's not sustaining itself, or it's not growing. Those are not the same as your customer problems. Your customers are, well, they've got things they're trying to do, and they've got their own problems, or they've got their own unmet needs. Look, Facebook, Instagram doesn't solve a problem. Arguably, it creates problems. However, everybody has the need to socialize, to be popular, to play, to have fun. And the business problems are not the same as customer problems. Your business doesn't want to play, socialize, have fun. Your business isn't the one that's having a hard time getting things done. Your business is having a hard time growing or sustaining itself. Your customer's not laying awake at night worrying about customer retention or whether you're meeting quarterly projections. So customer problems are not the same thing as business problems. Now, I spend an awful lot of time working with products and product organizations. And what I end up teaching them to focus on are things like customer problems and customer and user value. And what that means is they're going to have to get out of the building and talk to customers and understand their problems. And what that means is after we ship software, we're going to have to measure whether that software was actually used and people liked it. But that's the stuff that tends to fall away fast. I started by talking about, working with the US company Target, and systemically, they've learned to focus on this stuff. And then people I know at Target moving over to Best Buy. And as things well, as things get tough, as your business isn't able to support itself as well, if it's not meeting goals, the quickest thing to fall away are these things in green. The time we spend understand customer problems and the time we spend focusing on whether our customers and users actually got value. This understanding the dependency between these things and the tension between these two things, that's what we end up struggling with. Now, let's talk about the tension. We can solve a business problem or we can get business value without helping people. Wells Fargo proved that to us. They were able to create lots of business, lots of revenue by signing us up for accounts that we don't need. Businesses are able to create more value for themselves by making it hard for us to unsubscribe to things, or there's a lot of ways that we can create business value without solving a customer problem or out creating value for a customer. Businesses prove that. Now, I work with a lot of people that become very customer centric, and they find people with problems and solve problems for people. Well, this creates business problems if they solve a problem for one person. You've got one loud customer that complains, and we know what to do to solve their problem, and we can measure whether they do it. But product thinking means we're making leveraged investments. We need to solve problems not for a user or a customer, but for a class of customers and users so that we can get, it takes a lot of customers and users getting value for us to get business value. So if we become, really empathetic and focus on solving individual customer problems without understanding the impact on our business, that creates a problem. So look, focus on customer problems and needs too much, you'll sink your business. Focusing on business problems too much will also sink your business. Well, not right away, but eventually, or at least it will leave you with customer satisfaction issues and reputation issues inside there. So that managing that tension, making sure we balance those two things, that's the hard part. One last thing, this ties into how we handle OKRs, things like this, is businesses often do struggle with problems. We aren't growing enough. We're not retaining customers. And I see teams put to work to solve a business problem. And I wrote down here, you can't directly solve a business problem. The only one that can solve a business problem are your customers and users. They're the ones whose problems you have to find. If you're not able to retain customers, that's not their problem. They don't lay awake at night saying, hey, I'm sad because I hate your product. They're sad about other things. Your business may be sad because customers hate their product. Now it becomes your job to get out of the office and understand why customers hate your product. That becomes the work of teams. And this gets super annoying if you're using an Agile process, because what goes in a backlog isn't a backlog item called understand your customer's problems. That's usually not in a backlog. What's in a backlog is build something or collect underpants. There's lots of variations of that. This is summarizing this concisely in a way that resonates with business stakeholders is something that I struggle with constantly. And while it makes abstract sense to people, and they can, when things are going well, people can do this, but when things start going badly, people start to pull back and lose focus on those things. Now, that's the big thing I wanted to talk about. Is this this has just been me blathering. Is this a problem for you guys? Okay, yeah, please. And you had a question. Yeah, I'll repeat the question. How do you look for people that understand products? You already understand this, you know this, but how do you get the business people to stay focused on this or understand that? This is what I'm struggling with. Now I explain the model to them, but the problem is business people are responsible for your organization sustaining itself, and your organization does not sustain itself with happy people. The business people are responsible for lowering costs, increasing revenue, and they see what drives revenue: customers paying for things, or renewing subscription, or us becoming more efficient in our organization. The other thing that is a challenge between here is the correlation between customer value and business value is weak at best. You can't draw a direct connection between these. Let's pretend for a moment it's your job to design interiors for cars, and you design cup holders, and you design a super awesome cup holder. What's the contribution to a super awesome cup holder on the sales of cars? No one buys a car just because of a cup holder, unless you drive a BMW 3 Series that has the shittiest cup holder in the world, and that has a cup holder that is designed to spill hot coffee on passengers, I swear. And I honestly did get rid of one because it was one of the bigger annoyances I've had with that. We add features or capabilities into products, and we can't directly say what the return on investment for any one feature is. We can't directly say how something lowered cost. What we do is make sure we keep talking about the connection between these two things. Make sure we keep saying the so that when one of the things we get good at doing if you're a product person is reframing. By reframing, what I mean by that, let's write some stuff here, is we reframe, well, look, we are told build this idea. And reframing says, we start with a we believe statement, or we believe these customers have this problem. And if we build that idea, they will do this or do something and get some kind of benefit, and that's going to result in ROI or this benefit. It's the reframing that gets good at this. Get good at that. You're going to hear underpants gnome schemes all the time. You're going to hear build this so that we get return on investment or profit. You need to get good at saying, making sure we always connect the dots, get in the habit of that. That's the only thing I've got. The other, well, that's the first thing I've got. Get good at reframing. And then in organizations that I try to get to be more product centric, it's to go out and see it. Get people that are inside the building to observe people using a product. Get people using the product see the problems as they are. Get them to release and see if things are better. Get them to watch people using something new. Get them to watch people using things old. Empathy trumps data. You get empathy from seeing somebody use something. Nobody believes data. You know how that works. You form an opinion. You find the data that supports your opinion. If you don't like the data, like that data because it doesn't support your opinion, you will ignore it. But it's hard to ignore someone struggling. Get them out to see it, or at minimum, when you talk about things, at least tell the story about someone struggling with something. Those are the only things that I've got. And I got to tell you, I see it. I see executives that grab a hold of it and stick with it. And when we lose that executive that gets it and get it replaced with more of a traditional executive that's driven by focus on shareholder value, it falls away quickly. Yeah, not a helpful answer. That's what I'm struggling with. Yeah. There's a lot of other things that understanding that essential model starts to help us understand why OKRs are such a problem, why product metrics are so hard, because we're trying to measure this stuff, not that stuff, and the struggle with the correlation. Understanding how to organize product teams around our products. It's understanding this stuff that helps that work, and then understanding this stuff also helps us deal with breaks in our funding model, things like that. What else? What do you guys want to talk about? And how long do we have to talk?
And folks on Zoom, please start queuing your questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. We got one right over here, though.
Yeah,
here.
Please. Oh, sorry. Didn't look to the right. Looking that way.
Your comment on nobody trusting data. I don't know if I've fully experienced that in my shorter time than you, right, in product management. But would you mind kind of expounding on finding that line of, because I have found, at least, if you can present data in the right way, sometimes it can be right helpful in prioritization. But what have you experienced to kind of go with what you just said of, people only trust the data that they want to see and agree with?
Yeah. Let's see if I can give some elaborate a little bit on that. First, let me give you a couple pithy statements about data. First off, data tells you what happened, not why. And a quote from an old friend of mine is that data is exhaust, not fuel. If one of the things, and we got to talk about what kind of data too. I will focus. It sounds like you're a data person. You know what you're talking about with data. Is that true? Yeah. So when we look at data on usage, well, that lives here. And we draw a correlation that if people are using our product, they must be getting value. Correct. But usage is not revenue, and things like that. So we can show people are using our product, or we can show that people have lowered the use of the usage of our product is going down. Now, when we get to, let's say, if we can show that usage is going up, well, that's what happened. But why? Is it going up because people are struggling to find things and searching for things? Is it going up because people are having a hard time, or is it going up because people love using it? Or is it going, if usage is going down, is it because people hate your product, or if it's going down, is it because it is a sunny day and people would prefer to be playing outside? This is one of the companies I worked for a while back was the Weather Channel. And the Weather Channel used to bonus product teams based upon usage. And teams would get their bonus when their product was getting used a lot. And what causes people to use the Weather Channel a lot? When the weather's bad, and you literally had people praying for rain because they weren't going to get their bonuses if the weather was good. This starts to be bad. Now, when something is going down, what we get are lots of hypotheses about why, and everybody has a hypothesis about why, and then they will look for more data to support their hypothesis and their belief, versus get out and actually observe data. There's the only other thing I can talk about with data that, again, I'm looking for excuses to tell my favorite stories. Anybody ever had to work with doctors or clinicians or medical people before? There's a standard process that all doctors learn to use. Everyone from a doctor who's a veterinarian to somebody working in intensive care or something like that, they learn how to chart using something called a SOAP note. Anybody ever heard of that? Maybe somebody online. This is, if you're a doctor, what you do is gather subjective information and objective information. You combine those two in an assessment, and then you create a treatment plan. That's the SOAP part. So we combine subjective and objective data together, conjoin those, create a treatment plan. Part of that plan is what we're going to do to treat it, and it has a cycle time when we're going to go back and check with the patient. Take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning is a plan, and it has the cycle time built into it. Now, it's considered medical malpractice to just look at the data and make an assessment. It's considered medical malpractice to just talk to the patient and trust everything they say and not run tests and things like that. And I tell people it is product malpractice not to do this stuff too. Yeah, people will take data and spin, or they'll take data and spin their beliefs about what's going on here. That's all that I'm talking about, really. And I see people do that. And yeah, more to talk about there. There's always too many metrics to measure, and you can find one metric that's going down and another metric that's going up to prove whatever you want sometimes. Yeah. But terrific question. And
I just kind of follow up real quick. So if you can marry the watching the data happen with the actual data from behind the scenes, right, you can then form the more proper picture of what's going on.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what you're looking for, is you're trying to be more surgical, more medical, I guess. And that's that SOAP note, or that basic SOAP process. If you look at what a SOAP note is, yeah, I've worked with companies making medical software. And so I've seen lots of different spins on how that's carried through into medical charting. You're welcome. Anything online?
I've got one in the chat.
Good.
Yeah. So this question from Tadao, what tactics have you seen beneficial to gain more exposure to the feedback loop of a customer experience in the business to gauge value?
Oh, so all right. So one more time, what tactics?
What tactics have you seen beneficial to gain more exposure to the feedback loop of a customer experience and the business to gauge value?
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can hit one. Oftentimes I'll draw that type of model, and I'll ask people first, the business to talk about gaining value. The first practice I will ask people to do, there's articles on this online, it's published in at least one book, is I will ask people to do, now, by the way, let me label the parts of this. I draw this model all the time because I need to label the parts. People have heard me use this. This is output, this is outcome, and this is impact. And I will ask people, what do you do to measure, observe? And then let's go back to that SOAP thing. We want data to measure the outcomes, and we want to observe those things. And I'll ask people and teams, what do you do to measure those? A sprint review does not measure outcomes. A sprint review can measure stakeholder satisfaction. You can show it to people, but that's not the same as measuring whether someone actually uses what you wrote. So the first thing we do is I ask Agile teams to make a deliberate practice out of measuring or observing outcomes. For every feature capability they release, I will ask them to do a quick reflection and put those things into a 2x2. The first axis is actual effort, and you know your organization cares about that. Did it take days, weeks, months, or quarters, let's say, to release that? Now, by the way, actual effort you do at a feature capability level. You don't do actual effort at a story level or a backlog item level. Remember that stories are little parts of things, and people can't often use a story. Do I have to do that thing to point out? I'm taking way too long to answer this question. I'm going to come back and mop up some details. Look, if you just released a feature, how long did it take to release? If it took weeks, put it in the chart there, and then I will ask people to watch for and observe the actual outcome. When you first release something, the actual outcome is, I don't know. Because you don't know. Outcomes happen when things come out. You can't get data on usage until someone can use it or someone does use it. So if you haven't released it yet, or nothing's released, or you just showed it in a sprint review, there's no outcome. And by no outcome, I mean no value. The value of something not used is 0. Or there's what do we call this? There's we can get value in information, but it's not tangible. It's intangible value until we actually it gets used. But once it starts getting used, I'll ask people to rate that value or rate that outcome on a scale of awesome to awful, and everything in the middle, and then start to move that up as it gets value. What people quickly notice is how few things show up in awesome, how little actually bubbles to the top, and how most things are somewhere well below. So I want teams to be aware of this and stakeholders to be aware of this. Now, that's looking at the outcome. We can actually measure and observe what people do. Then we've got to go back to that, what I talked about is reframing. If people don't use it as much, we have to connect the dots. How is that contributing to or not contributing to return on investment? What's interesting is we can build software that actually is the opposite of return on investment. We can spend money building something, release it to people for internal use, and it can make them slower and less efficient at their job, which actually costs us money. And we want to see that the outcome was awful or not so good. We want to look at how we're measuring success and show people, look, people hate it, they don't use it very much, and the net result is it's slowing people down or costing us money or reducing customer satisfaction. You draw those connections. I'm not answering that question very well, but it's make sure you understand before you release something how you're going to measure the outcome, and make sure you do measure it, observe it, make sure you see it. That's all I got.
Tadao, if you want any clarification on that,
yeah,
answer, feel
please,
free to put that in the chat.
You can unmute and talk to Steve. I can't hear you, but
we can come back to it.
Yeah, please ask more questions.
Okay, let's get another one from Zoom. This is from Lane. As an engineer, I'm 2 or 3 levels removed from my end users. In smaller companies, there might be one person between me and the end user. In larger, maybe more. What techniques do you recommend for learning how my users use the software I build and what my users need?
I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, maybe. If first, that ties, okay, the last part of the question was, what techniques can you use to understand how your customers use it and
how my users use it, what they need.
And what they need. Was that the last one?
And what my users need.
And what your users need. Okay, let's, maybe I won't go, let's hit the first one. Remember I talked about one of the twitchy parts that we get into are our product metrics. First, if we talk about understanding use, I am known for a practice called story mapping. Story mapping is about that. You can't build a good story map. What you do with a story map is you map use. You map what people do to use a product. You don't map features or capabilities. You map the steps that your users take. If I'm a user and to use a product, I do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5. That's what a map looks like. If I look at step 4 and I decompose it to parts of step 4, the people will do this and this and this inside of step 4. This is the way a story map comes together. Now, first thing we do is map use or understand use. And the second thing we do is we plan to measure use. With every step a user takes, you measure it or you instrument. Now, I'm old. I used to build software in the 90s, and we didn't have good analytics tools for doing this. So the way we instrumented our product to measure use was we would just log. We log when people started something, log when people finished something. I could measure how many times they did that something and how long it took them to do that something. That's it. So there's a bit of reframing there. If you're an engineer and you're many steps removed, ask for the story. That's another thing. I'm known for stories and story mapping, and I'll remind people that good story describes what users are doing, describes use, and tell me the story. A story is not what we're supposed to build. It's tell me a story about how people will use this product when it ships. So first thing to do is to understand use, ask for use. Now, if you're many steps removed from it, a couple of different things. You can either not worry about it because it's not your problem, but you're asking the question because you are, and that means you're going to have to start to ask to tell me a story about how someone uses your product. I'm going to fish for a quick slide. I mentioned getting a very early start with stories and with Agile development. I started in the year 2000, and I was using a process called extreme programming. Actually, let me show this picture quickly first, just so we know this. The guy who's known for extreme programming is this guy. Where is he now? I've lost my stuff. Actually, I'll go with that. That guy's name is Kent Beck. Kent Beck is the author of a book called Extreme Programming Explained. This is where the concept of stories comes from. And he was the person that I learned stories from. Sorry, I'm fishing for slides that I want to show. Stories came from this guy who was an engineer. They came from extreme programming. And in introducing the concept, Kent said that software development has been steered wrong by the word requirement, defined in the dictionary as something mandatory or obligatory. The word requirement is, the word carries a connotation of absolutism and permanence, inhibitors to embracing change, and the word requirement is just plain wrong. Now, what he was railing against is we can make something a requirement. As an engineer, you can be told to build something, but it doesn't mean you're solving a problem, and it doesn't mean that people will use it. And when we tell stories, that's what we're telling stories about. This came from a back and forth from Kent and me. I cut and paste that from an email message. It's 10 plus years old. What I was thinking of was the way users sometimes tell stories about the cool new things the software they use does. He gave this example that I type in a zip code and it automatically fills in the city and state without me having to touch a button. I think that was the example that triggered the idea. If you can tell stories about what the software does and generate energy and interest and vision in your listener's mind, then why not tell stories before the software does it? That's the idea here, to tell stories about what your customers and users will do when they get it done. So it's okay for you to ask for that story. That's the root, or that's the heart of this stuff. And then if you really want to know what they do, you either have to go out and observe them or get data on it. And if you can instrument that thing, and there's a lot of tools to do this better than just logging it and dropping it into a database and summing it up. Long answer. Helping? Yeah.
Okay,
please.
we got one here in the room.
Yeah.
Let me give you the mic.
I'm just curious, what do you consider best practice? Let's say I'm a product manager, been working with the designers, and I have the next iteration totally locked in. How do you see best practice in translating that to engineering work? How involved should the product manager be in articulating all the different steps that need to happen to bring that to life, and how that gets managed through, Agile or Scrum methodology?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me back up. One concept that you should be aware of, that's in a common concept inside of product companies is something called a core product team, or what in jargon gets referred to as a triad. Have you heard of that before? And for people that haven't, inside of a product team, what we look for, oftentimes this Venn diagram is drawn. We want to look for the intersection of what's valuable, usable, and feasible, or balancing business concerns, user concerns, and technology concerns. And we look for a group of three people: somebody that understands business concerns. This is usually a product owner or a product manager. Somebody who understands users. This is usually a designer, and somebody that understands technology, and that's usually a senior tech person. So ideally, these three people are collaborating constantly. So the how best to communicate it with engineers, that guy does that. That person is thinking about this intersection between what's really valuable to our organization and valuable to our business. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. And this person is thinking about how do we build it and what's most cost effective to build. And it's the collaboration between these people. And then the core team works together a lot. And when we talk about agile steps like backlog grooming or backlog refinement, we expect these people to be there and that person to be there. And when engineers are asking, how do we build that, or what's a way to do that? Well, we've got someone who's technical that was in on making the decisions and understands it. That's the ideal. I was waiting to, let me bring my fake money. So I'm going to do this with real money, except not that one. Oftentimes when we're talking about a feature is something, it's something big. It's something that takes, where's my other picture I drew? Something that takes days, weeks, months, or quarters to build. Right, I see you nodding. It's not something, but stories and backlogs are things that take a couple days each to build, and it takes multiple sprints to build. So we've got this problem with this feature, and it needs to be decomposed into a backlog. This is what a backlog looks like, and a backlog is composed of lots of little things. Does your company use a product like Jira to do things? And they've got dominant market share. I've worked with Atlassian off and on throughout the years, and Atlassian has a dirty secret. In Atlassian, product managers don't use Jira. Product managers break things down into smallest valuable components, and teams work together to decompose things into buildable items, because half of a dollar bill is not worth 50 cents. And half of a feature is not worth half the value. That's not the way it works. So once we get down to a level that is below valuable, now we're talking about, and I'll draw a distinction between what is a release strategy and what is a development strategy. And development strategies focus on building things efficiently, effectively, building things predictably. And we want the people responsible for building things predictably to have their eyes on how best to decompose this and how best to sequence things to build. It really should be a team activity, not a product manager's activity. Did I lose the plot in the question you had there? Just make sure you're working with engineers early, defining most cost-effective solutions, and make sure you're working with engineers and team when you start decomposing and breaking things down and sequencing things into the next sprint and moving through. It really is a collaborative activity. That's what ideally that backlog grooming and refinement is for. I was looking for an excuse to rip up some money. So.
Last time I saw you do it, it was 100. So I don't know what you're, no, I'm kidding. That's not true. That's not true. So Lane just had a follow-up question. Why do we have to still enter city and state? No, I'm kidding. He does not expect an answer from that.
Yeah, I don't think
we
so.
do.
Yeah,
we do.
And we still do.
We still do.
I got a COVID shot last Sunday, and I had to enter it multiple times. I had to enter my birthday, I don't know how many times, once to see if I could get it, and then again. Anyway, but yeah.
Those guys just weren't telling the story, were they?
No, they weren't. Yeah.
All right, here's one online from Robert. What best practices do you apply to the early stages of product discovery in order to bridge the gap between business value and customer value? So early stages of product discovery, bridging that gap.
Gosh, I don't know if I wish he was here so that he could unmute and ask. So discovery work is the work we use to understand problems and to test ideas before we build it. I think he definitely knows that, and other people know that. And again, it's this tension or this correlation between understanding customer problems and measuring whether customers can actually use it and the business value, the return on investment. In early discovery, it's just, and please elaborate a little bit. It's keeping that hypothesis visible, keeping that, we believe customers have this problem. If we build the solution, they will do this, and it's going to result in this. Now, this is where we get, I've worked with some product managers and heads of product that are really strong about making sure we keep that connection visible. We're talking with a guy who wants to understand what's the impact on everything we do on lifetime customer value. Does this mean we're more likely to keep this customer, that they're more likely to use the product? Always keep that visible. When we talk from a marketing perspective, when we talk about understanding customers have a problem from a marketing perspective, there are marketing terms like TAM and SAM, or total addressable market and serviceable addressable market. Steve, do you know those terms? Or basically, we use these terms to understand what is the size of people, how big this problem is, how big is this problem, how many people have this problem, and if they use it, how is that? Because if you solve it, we want to make sure that the business people understand we're not solving this problem for one person or two people or a few people. We're solving this problem for a lot of people, and if we solve it for them, that's how it's going to result. Keep that stuff visible. In product discovery, you're only going to be talking to a few users, but you've got to keep going back and checking in on how big a problem is this for everyone. How big of a problem is this, and how will solving it result in that ROI? But it's funny, you keep telling that story. The discovery work usually is more hands-on, focused on individual people or small groups of people. And yeah, you can lose the plot pretty quickly.
Okay, quick time check here.
Yeah.
We had scheduled to go as late as 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
We'll do that if we want. I think some people are starting to drop off. It's a lunch hour, right?
Yeah.
But there's a couple more in the room. Are there any other questions we should queue up here? So I've got one here, and I've got a couple more on Zoom. You good with that, Jeff?
Yep, I'm great.
We do those?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pull it into the room here, and then we'll wrap up with the couple that are on Zoom.
So Jeff, you mentioned that Atlassian isn't using Jira for their product backlog and that management. And I'm curious what techniques you've seen used for specifically product backlog, product road mapping outside of, Excel, Wiki, manual things.
Yeah, I've worked with Atlassian a long time, and in the old days, they were generally using a wiki, using Confluence to manage a lot of this stuff. Atlassian, through acquisition, bought. The irony is, it's funny. Atlassian had a group building a portfolio management tool, and the tool that they used to manage the portfolio management tool was not their tool, because that'd be crazy. They were using Confluence to manage the backlog for their portfolio management tool. There are other tools like AHA and ProdPad and things like that do that, that you look at managing big things. What is the tool? Atlassian bought a company.
Trello?
No, something that was more for the big stuff. Shoot. It's a mess managing the big stuff, and that's another big discussion, is a connection between that. What drives priority for big things is product strategy, and now we're in a strategic view, and understanding strategic decisions and how that affects priority isn't the same as prioritizing kind of a tactical backlog. I don't have a good answer. I see a mess of different tools used for it, and but it is common to see a separate tool for managing strategic thinking than tactical planning. And that's what I see happening at Atlassian. And organizations that are using tools like Jira to manage strategic stuff are generally struggling. Yeah, it's just too messy. And there's a big difference between your options, things that you might do, and your plans, things that you are doing.
Yeah, I've used similar tools like AHA, that some of them feel a little half-baked, and so I just wanted to ask, what have you seen in practice?
They seem a little half-baked. I don't know. The people who make ProdPad are people I've known for a long time, and they're smart people. I might look at that just because I know the people better, and I know there's some good thinking in the product, but when you start doing things at scale, there's a lot of messy things we're thinking about when we're thinking strategically. And yeah, managing lists of things just isn't a way that's not how you manage strategy.
Agile Craft, does that sound right? Jira Align, I think is what it's
Jira
called.
Align, yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Thank you.
And I don't know much about
crowd
Align.
online.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's Jira line that I was trying to think of.
All right. So a couple more here. I'm trying to break into product management. I'm new to this field. I'm currently reading Crack the PM Interview. My question would be, how do I start learning about it so that I can crack the job somewhere and start working as product manager?
Yeah, that's a good question. The good news is, the good news is anybody who's a product manager didn't go to school to learn to be a product manager and get a job as a product manager. That's not the way it works. Anybody who works as a product manager knows that they came from some other place in the organization. Product managers maybe subject matter experts that came from industry, they may be engineers, they may be user experience people, or they came from somewhere else. People that learn product management in universities, things like that, learn how to manage brands of toothpaste for Procter & Gamble. And that's a different thing than technology product management. That's another longer discussion. Like tech product management is a very different thing than traditional product management. The best way to crack it is to get into an organization that is more product centric in the way they work. Find an organization that really does do discovery work. Find an organization that really does do a good job with product metrics and interview and work with customers, and take any role, because it does not matter what role you started in the organization, and lean in, find ways to participate. Again, most product managers are promoted from within organizations, and they move in from some other role. I don't know. That's not answering the question very well. There's just no shortcut. There's no amount of yeah. You can read the right books, you can do the right research, but there's a difference between reading lots of books about swimming and swimming. It does not matter how many books you read about swimming or skiing or skydiving or any of those things. Everything changes when you do it, and you need to get into an organization where you're working alongside of people who are doing it and doing it well, and you need to start working closer with the craftsman model starts to apply more. The apprentice journeyman craftsman model, the way you get good at doing something is working close to somebody else who's doing it. The biggest problem is finding an organization who does it well. So start by finding an organization who does have a decent product management practice. Hope that's an answer.
Okay. I got two more for you. Are you good with that?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm great.
Okay. Let's see. With your years of experience, what's your best advice for a Scrum Master, for a product owner?
Best advice.
That's the question. It's left open.
It's pretty open. For a Scrum Master, for a product owner. Let's go to basic. Let's start with the product owner thing. Oh God, where to start? If I were to give, actually, I used to ask product managers that question. And so let me give you the answer I got half the time. For people who are product managers that have started and gotten good at their job, and I would ask them, if you had one piece of advice for somebody going into this field, what would it be? And that's to spend more time with your customers. I draw this model and color coded in green, and that means spend more time talking to people about your product and how they're using it and things like that. Get out there and spend more time with them doing that stuff. If that's a one thing. Now, there's a lot of conceptual models to understand. There's a lot of skills and practices to get better at. But if there's one thing you should do more of, it's spend more time with the people that use your product. Now, the other spin here is I am trying to write a book, and one of the things one of the assertions I make is we can view anything through a product lens, including your process and the way that you work. And if you're a Scrum Master, your product is your team and the way that your team works. And what we do is look at our team and understand their problems. We make suggestions and then help the team get better at things and observe. Is the team getting actually using the practice that you've suggested or doing something else? Are they becoming, if you suggest something, do they see it, try it, use it, and say good things about that practice? Did they become more efficient and more effective? And if you're a Scrum Master, same thing. Your product is the process. Your team are your customers and users. Your team and your stakeholders are, and spend more time with them. And if you suggest, what is the other joke applies here? What that means is your process is the product, and your team are your users, let's say. There's the old joke that there's only two industries that refer to their customers as users, and that's software people and drug dealers, except drug dealers have the good sense not to refer to their users as stupid. Now I see people referring to their stupid users all the time. If they suggest a feature and users can't use it, they refer to the users as stupid. And if you're a Scrum Master and you suggest practice and your team is not able to adopt it or use it well, it's the wrong practice. It's not the right thing at the right time. It's not their fault. It's your fault. If your process is the product, and if people can't use your product, it's not their fault. It's yours, and you need to meet them where they are. Figure out how to help them focus on the value they're getting out of that process. Yeah. So the answer is the same. Spend more time with your customers and users. It's just if you're a Scrum Master, that's your team.
Awesome. All right. Here's the last one. How have you seen companies move from a project mindset to a product mindset?
Let me ramble about that for a minute. That's what I get pulled into most often. First off, maybe I'll give you one suggestion, is there isn't a grassroots way to do this. If you're coming at a team level or at some lower level, you can start to, I'll coach teams to start focusing more on their problems, focusing more on outcomes, to reframe, help stakeholders see the connection, but you've got to eventually change leadership's mind. What I heard a great expression that if you start at the grass level, you will eventually hit the grass ceiling. Have anybody heard that? That was a funny expression. So you've got to get up to leadership. Now, in organizations that are making a change, that I'll end up working with, I'll go straight to the top and I'll work with leadership and make sure they understand fundamentals of product thinking and how that changes things. So we need leadership support, and we need leaders to start moving their focus to these things in green. The effort we put into understanding customers, the effort we put into measuring customer value and understanding the correlation between customer value and business value. So it kind of needs to start top down. One more time, the question was, what have I seen organizations do to do this? It starts as a deliberate effort. Last year and this year, I've been going back and forth between here and Iceland because I've been working with Iceland Air. Iceland Air is an airline that's small enough to, I can talk to leadership in Iceland Air, and they were completely sold on this. At a leadership level, they understand it. Now, the reason that's important for them to understand, or they know they have to start thinking differently, is because they're freaking Iceland Air. They're tiny. They're competing against United and Delta and KLM, and they've got to do it with a lot fewer people. And so they know they need to think differently, and they're looking for anything that will allow them to approach things differently. The reason Target started thinking differently is because Target, everybody knows Target has had big security breaches. They've had all kinds of other things that were problems. They historically, before they started this transition, they were losing scads of market share to Amazon. They were in trouble from a business perspective, and they know that they couldn't keep doing the same things. It starts at the business level, and we start we start by having to make a business case for doing this. How is this going to help the organization? The organizations this has been successful at are the organizations that have business leadership that have been able to see why there's a business case for doing this. And organizations I've worked with that can't make that business case, eventually the effort dries up and dies. That's a problem. Those are the same organizations that adopt Agile process in order to get more things built faster. And there's that appetite at feed the beast thing never works. Agile eventually fails inside those organizations that don't have a business case for this stuff either. Not helpful, but it's a leadership that needs to understand.
There's a follow-up comment / question about it, which I think might be interesting. You may or may not have any response to this, but a lot of these questions have been about best practices, best techniques.
Yeah.
Well, but really what we're talking about is mindset shifts, right?
Yes.
Can we technique, in quotes, can we technique our way into product thinking?
Yeah.
That might be a rhetorical question. I don't know, but
yeah, no. I built a longer form presentation. It might be available somewhere online. But there's something weird about the way humans are wired, I believe. We are not wired to think this way. It's counterintuitive. We suffer from bias. We tend to believe our ideas are good, and we tend to believe that if we build them, we're going to make money. We tend to believe we already know people and their problems. We will self-substitute. Now, the techniques or the practices that the techniques that I'm going to tell you, it works almost all the time to get somebody to observe a customer struggling with a product. That's the first technique, get people out there. If people aren't buying this, don't have the right mindset, all you do is get them out there. Gosh, what is in the Steve Jobs bio? Everybody wants to be Steve Jobs and have incredible ideas, but one of the things that a point they make about Steve is how much time he spent in Apple stores watching people use products, how much time he spent with people, how much time Steve Jobs as a person spent here looking at customer problems and unmet needs. He was good at that. So the only techniques are getting people out there now and seeing them and actually measuring those things. Those are the techniques. But once, if you're a business stakeholder, you're getting hit from two directions. You can go out there and watch those customers and user problems and see their unmet needs. But if you're a business stakeholder, you are getting beat up by shareholders. You're getting beat up by boards of directors. It's their needs you start listening to, and their needs are for meeting quarterly revenue targets, sustained growth, things like that. And the problem is they end up focusing more on those needs. The only techniques are to get people out or start paying attention to these things in green. And those are easy to fall away from. People, we lose them. We focus on what we think the biggest problem is. And for business stakeholders, the ones that really need to be sold, their biggest problem is going to be their board of directors threatening to fire them because they didn't meet quarterly revenue targets. I lost my plot on answering that question. It takes deliberate effort to do the right thing, and falling back on those kinds of techniques.
All right. Any final thoughts or parting shots, Jeff?
Do I have any parting shots? No, my biggest concern is the same one that you all have, is how do you, this is my mindset. This is the one I'm trying to help organizations get. I see organizations get it, but I see it as sort of transient. If leaders lose it, and if we lose those leaders, it goes away or it wanes. I want help. I'm looking for ways to explain this faster, more concisely, more clearly. If you've got ideas, if you've ever been able to explain things to a stakeholder or to someone in your organization, to a business person, or if you're a product person, you've been able to explain things to a developer in a way that they get it, I want to know what worked. That's my only parting thought is a plea for help.
How do people get a hold of you? JeffPattonAssociates.com?
Yeah, if you just Google Jeff Patton, you'll find my website at jpattanassociates.com. It's jeff@jpattanassociates.com is email, and I'm terrible at answering email, as Steve can attest to, but I do have an assistant who eventually does get to and prioritize and arrange for conversations, and I love the conversations. That's what I want to do. And you should take a class too. I should be pitching, taking classes. I teach certified product owner classes, 1 a month online.
Excellent. Well, let's give Jeff a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thanks.